Good people, we are back for another episode. I'm gonna give you the heads up right now. We definitely gonna do a part two. As you can see in the title, $455 million is a lot of money. So we're gonna need a follow-up to get a better understanding on how that rolls. So as you know, make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, stay planted.
Easy to forget all the noble words you said when you get down to the bottom line.
All right, here we go. OG, triple OG, Mayor Woodfin, how you doing, brother?
Bro, let me tell you, I've seen some introductions in my life. That was pretty fire. That's pretty dope. Much respect, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I got to shout out two black-owned companies, 413 Media and Don G Media. They both came together and made that shake. So appreciate
Yeah,
that.
they. I mean, I know you, brother. I know your worth, but I appreciate that how they highlighted you with the dope soundtrack.
Appreciate that, boss. Appreciate it. Well, as you can see, we are here to talk about money. Those that follow the Planning Podcast, we keep it consistent. You know, we have the opportunity to interview good folks like yourself and just see how money reflects the way you make professional decisions. And what I would like to do, because when we see the mayor, we see a lot of the responsibility. But I think that I want to tap into some of the work that was done prior to. So you got into office November of 2017. And again, the title $400+ million as a budget. Before you walk into the seat in regards of officially, what type of research and planning was done to get a better understanding on how the city works?
So a significant amount of research was done. And before I continue, brother, let me step back and just say I'm honored to be on the podcast, man. I'm grateful for the exposure you give, not just to your clients, but to the overall community, just financial literacy and being financially solvent. So thank you for the work you do.
Yes,
I would
sir.
say this. I was fortunate prior to being the mayor of the city of Birmingham. I was a lawyer for the city of Birmingham for 8 years. And in that same window, I spent about 4 years on the school board. So being the president of the school board, from a governance standpoint, you learn to deal with budgets. Being a lawyer for the city, you just learn all the operations of the city.
Right.
One of the things is how budgets function. And then as a candidate, I spent an entire year as a candidate where I took a even deeper dive into what we needed to spend money on. And so there's so many different ways I can go about asking this question. So as you continue to throw me some questions, I can break down what our budget really means and how we're supposed to be good stewards. I tell people every day in this role as mayor, I am a steward of tax dollars. And in one lane, I'm a mayor, I'm a chillier and ambassador for all things Birmingham. But in the other hand, this is an operation. I am running a system with employees. I'm an employer, and there is a budget, and we allocate resources.
Right. And that's one of the elements I wanted to highlight because, you know, even as I was doing a little bit of research before our interview today, looking over some documents, I believe there was a kind of a diagram that had the citizens up top and then the mayor, right? As you mentioned, you're working for the city. And when you look at the city through the prism of a business, right, and say, okay, what are the revenue streams? How does the city make money? Can you break down how the city makes money in regards of revenue?
Yeah, man. It's my job to speak the plainest language for folk to understand their role and how their government works on their behalf. And so I tell people every day, I'll break it down. One is we derive taxes based on how people and businesses engage our community. And so if you have a dream to be a business owner, or if you are a current business owner, then you have to engage the city of Birmingham and get a business license. That business license is the same as a tax. And so you pay for your business license to operate your business within our city limits. That is a business license tax. Once you do that, you then open your business You hire employees, and your employees pay an occupational tax. When your customers come into your business to purchase whatever they purchase within our city limits, your customers pays a sales tax. So that is a business license tax, a occupational tax, and then a sales tax. Business license tax for you, the business owner, occupational tax for your employees that work for you, and your customers pay a sales tax. That is one of the plainest way I can break that portion down. Then you have this. Sports and entertainment is big in our city. And so when you have people come into our city for, let's say, the Garth Brooks concert that is coming the first weekend in June, and apparently the entire world is excited. Well, that's Alabamians, that is. Or many of those folk won't live in our city limits. And so when they come here, they will actually stay in a hotel within our city limits.
That's right.
When they stay in our hotel, they actually pay a lodging tax. And so when you shop online, that's a use sales tax. When you get gas, there's an extra tax that's for that gas. So you got lodging taxes, you got gas tax, you got occupational taxes, you have business license tax, and you have sales taxes. But in addition to that, one more tax I'll give you. If you build a building in this community, you need a permit. You have to have a permit fee. You have their construction fees. And so that is like the gist. I didn't even name everything, but the interaction there. When you go into a convenience store or gas station, you want to buy you a bag of Golden Flake dill pickle, vinegar and salt chips. Those chips are 99 cents. You're gonna pay some sales tax, and those chips gonna be $1 and change.
Right. And that's a beautiful illustration on one community, right? How a community can appreciate a corporation employing within their neighborhood, providing products or services in which people will either through foot traffic or vehicle entertain that, and the different taxation that helps feed into the revenue of the business, right? And so, and I believe what your theme in regards of, or really the principle you started out with in 2017, which was putting people first. Just in those two illustrations, you can see, ensuring that someone has a viable job, and we are engaging in opportunities that can bring foot traffic into the city, into the state. Those that exposure can then lead into some revenue generating opportunities. And so it seems like business owners play a vital role. And before we get into the vision you have for the budget, because we always tell our clients a budget is nothing but your vision with some numbers, right? And so what vision do you have on paper? And then we're going to put some numbers to it. As you've been operating as a mayor, we all had to deal with something, business owners, organizations, employees, we all had to deal with this pandemic all at the same time, right? So there was the health concerns that needed leadership and guidance and expertise, but there was also this business aspect, right? So we just talked about the revenue streams of the city. How did the city react to the pandemic? Because actually, there's some stats that I want to read that I was able to gather. And I believe it's through Brookings. So 47% of small business owners in Birmingham had less than 2 weeks of cash liquidity. In Birmingham, 90% of small businesses had fewer than 14 cash buffer days, and only 59% of small businesses on average had sick pay. So knowing the role businesses played, knowing that there was a shutdown, how did that impact the revenue of the city, and how did the city react to the pandemic?
So, man, that is a really great question. And you're right. The frame you laid out, the codependency between municipal government and how we derive taxes, and those businesses who had to shut down because of a global health pandemic, and the negative effect of that. I want to speak to the negative effect and the impact on the business owner first. A business that only has 14 days of cash on hand, they would be in some serious trouble if a pandemic, if the shutdown lasted more than 2 weeks, right? Which it did, turned out to be almost 2 years.
Right.
In that vein, businesses shut down or go out of business. We no longer derive that business license tax. If their employees stop working or quit, or they have to lay off employees, we can't collect occupational taxes. And if their doors shutter and they don't have an online service, then we can't collect sales taxes. And if there are no sports or more entertainment going on in your city, then you're not really collecting lodging taxes. And so we braced for that impact locally, well before we ever knew any federal resources or dollars would come. We got very, very conservative, and our budget is based on projections. So municipal government, local money, we can't print money. We're not the federal government.
Right.
We can only spend what comes in. And so if it's projected to come in less, then we have to budget for less.
Right.
So I want to use some of your words because I know the audience I'm speaking to. If it doesn't come in, we can't spend it.
That's right.
It's that plain.
That's
And
right.
so our budgets are based on projections. And so we brace for the worst impact based on knowing that how many businesses only had 14 days on cash on hand. Now, what we also did, though, we saw for creating this called the BHM Strong Fund, which provided loans to a lot of small businesses as a bridge for them to be able to stay alive, stay afloat, stay open, knowing that, one, we didn't know when the federal money was going to come, and two, if it came, everybody wasn't going to get it. And we know this city not only has a large Black population, but a significant amount of those businesses are Black owned. And we know they were at the back of the line of getting some of that federal help. So we created our own loan fund to be in a position to make sure they can stay open. In return for staying open, we remain in a better position, again, to get that business license tax, for their employees to remain employed, so to continue to collect occupational taxes, and for their customers to be able to still come in or find a unique way for them to engage their customer, either pick up, drive through, whatever it was, so we can still collect taxes. And those are the ways we saw for an offset the pain that was caused.
And there's a few, as I like to call, free jewelry moments that you just shared in regards of, we tell our clients, make sure they have 6 to 12 months of reserves saved up for a rainy day. Right. And as you said, we braced for this. There was a preparation. We were able to access resources, tap into our partners, and make sure that what it takes to make money, we make sure that they have a contingency plan, right, that they can tap into that allows them to continue to operate. And was very interesting. Even as we look at the you making that decision prior to the federal resources being displayed or dispersed. If we look at the sequence, right, with the federal resources, it was the business owners first that had the opportunity to tap into some funds. But ironically enough, as you mentioned, the PPP was directly for their payroll, their employees, knowing the role that taxes play in regards of the revenue streams of the cities and the communities they operate. So that's a really good point that you made, and I'm glad that you shared that. All right, so we got a little bit of background in regards of how you came into office, shared, I would say probably one of the best example of someone's leadership is when things is a little rocky, right? Like there was some turbulence. And so the fact that we were able to come out of this with, celebrating with some surplus in some form of fashion,
right?
I think it's a really good day. When we think about this budget, right? And as we mentioned, the budget, the projection essentially is just your vision with numbers tied to it. What I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a capital and capital improvement bucket, and then there is this operating budget, right? So two separate buckets. Well, how would you differentiate the two?
Yeah, but man, you know what? Since you mentioned the whole notion of 6 to 12 months of a I would call a rainy day account for your clients or just individuals, period. The City of Birmingham also has a third account. We have what's called a reserve fund rainy day account. And it's millions of dollars in that account. We do that on purpose for things like a global health pandemic or anything can come up in the community. You can lose some major employer, and that's 13, 15 million in occupational taxes going out the door, or the state could change occupational taxes. So we keep a third account, which is a rainy day account, because we still have to provide city services. It is as a taxpayer, you put in these monies, and your expectation back is I pick up your trash on time. If you need the police, that somebody's on the other end of the phone for 911, that someone shows up, that you have a fire truck shows up, you've got a health issue, a paramedic shows up, you go from point A to B in the city limits, that I don't damage your tires, I have to pave that street and fix that pothole.
That's right.
That's what your taxes are spent on. So I
Right,
wanted to get
right.
that in. But related
Right.
to these three accounts, we have a rainy
That's
day
good.
savings account.
That's good.
We have a capital account that says, hey, for that home you purchase, or that loft you have, it's possible that at some point you're going to need roof repair or ceiling repair. You're going to need a new doorknob, or you're going to need some paint upkeep, or you may have some water issues or bathroom issues or electrical. That's what that capital budget's for. No different than an individual who has a home or a business. Those operating expenses, again, those everyday things. We got to pay our employees. We have to provide gas for these trucks that pick up refuge and trash. We have to provide gas for these police vehicles that go from point A to B, and the paramedic truck, and the fire truck, and the Department of Transportation vehicle. We have to pay for these lights that when you enter our court system or our libraries, or we got to pay to cut the grass at the park so the kids can play safely in the playground. All these things are like very basic that any individual can relate to.
Right. Right. That's good. That is so. And I thoroughly appreciate you pointing out that reserve account, because ultimately, I believe hopefully the takeaway for our audience is seeing the separation of duties, right? We have one account for this operation. We have another account for our reserves for a rainy day. And then in regards of improvements, say, I actually want to extend my deck a bit. All right. Well, make sure you got a separate account of that, and so you did bring up something that I chuckled when you talked about the pothole. So I have seen a situation where somebody said, hey, Mayor, can I take a picture? And, Mayor, he's too cool for school. So he's like, yeah, come on, take a picture. They turn around and they say, so this pothole I hit about 2 days ago.
Yeah, they get me.
Could you educate us on the timeline? Because I think that is something that is of interest of those that may have a request that is in a queue, or they're thinking about putting in a request. How does that flow in regards of the capital budget resource?
So every year, you in your individual life, you know how much you make based on when you file your taxes, right? Or at the end of the year, you get your income thing that says this is how much you make.
Yep.
That W-2, that's breakdown. Some people get paid every 2 weeks. Some people get paid every week. Some people get paid once a month. But you know what comes in. So that's can, if you have a budget, you can dictate what needs to go out, how much needs to go out. And separate from that, what you need to set aside for rainy day or emergency issue. Municipal government does the same thing. Our budget year is from July 1 to June 30th of every year. And so in preparation, so when we're in the middle of that budget, we only spend what's projected to come in and what we projected that we can go out. So you don't go higher at all within that fiscal year, which sometimes we end up with the surplus. In addition to that, the process says that you have to prioritize your needs. And so for street paving, for example, which ultimately that's how the pothole got there, you need to put the street.
Right.
Our Department of Transportation goes out and assess all the streets from in category A to Z, from worst to best. And we, over a 5-year period, you just break down. So within each year, you budget for those streets you want to pave. The budget every year has been $10 million in street paving. So over 5 years, $50 million budgeted. Divided by 5, $10 million a year. And within that $10 million, you prioritize the streets you need to pave.
Right. Makes sense, people. It's one of those things where, two things I wanted to highlight, because it's a really good point, and I'm just going to add an asterisk when we think about building one's credit. So credit is an aspect of one's financial picture, and we tell our clients, or even those that are listening, is that you're going to need income to forecast, right? Like you need something that is consistent in order to work on your credit, because the one thing about credit, they need to see consistency, right? And so unless you got money coming in that that's guaranteed, it's very difficult to strategize on how you can build your credit. So I'm glad that you've made that parallel in regards of forecasting, but also keeping in mind that we can't, if there is we can't overdraft the account. I'll just say it like that.
I appreciate being on this cast with you, man, because believe it or not, the city ebbs and flows in assets and liabilities as well. So
right.
we have credit too. If the city doesn't have enough money, like let's say that all the stormwater issue in the city limits of Birmingham, that's infrastructure. But if it has a price tag of $100 million and you have to do that right away, we don't have that just to give the stormwater, because you got to do everything else. You got to pay your employees and other infrastructure issues. And so if I want to go to the bond market, that is the same as borrowing money. Well, if you borrow money, that you got to have good credit, and cities have a credit rating no different than you as an individual. And if you got to pay the money back, you got to be a good steward, and they check your liabilities. And so your pension, the pension was a liability for the city. If your liabilities get higher than your assets, our city credit rating is downgraded. So look, we're really no different than any other business or individual. We got to be good stewards, brother.
Right. That's a great analogy, great parallel. Man, I actually want to get deep into that pension a bit now that you mention it, because that is another element of financial stewardship that one would have to inherit, right? Like I didn't create this, and so there is this. All right, now I got to jump into it. So we know that when they established the framework for Social Security, all right, at this age, this person is going to get X amount. Right. What they used as a basis ultimately was a mortality table. So when that was established, there was a duration of, okay, they may live an additional 5 years, right? They may live an additional 7 years. And so we'll start setting money aside to accommodate that. But over time, technology evolved, health recommendations evolved to where folks are living longer, right? And so we ultimately, and that's why Social Security is having to update some of the ways in which their revenue stream comes in to be able to fill, the responsibility. But also in the same breath, this is what happened to pensions, right? You had a set amount of money for people to retire on, but now they are living longer than what you expected. And so there's that rub there that, one would have to inherit and address at the same time. And then, of course, you got the pandemic. So we won't get too deep into that, because I think that's a PhD lesson in the bond market, and then as well looking at some of these, these tables. All right. So within that, we have those two different buckets that we talked about, and we talked about the attractions that's coming. World Games, right? So World Games is around the corner. What type of projections are being discussed on what we'll just say the economic impact this could have to the city, and then as well, how can residents get involved? How can they participate in that?
So on the first end of that, we're talking about up to possibly $200+ million in the economic impact, and I want to explain why. The World Games will be over 10 days, July 7th through the 17th. And when you unpack that, it's not just the athletes that will be in thousands of athletes that will be in our city, but it's spectators and visitors and dignitaries from 100+ countries over that same length of time. And so all these venues will be used as well, and all these games will be on display. That means all of our hotels are full every single day for 10+ days. That means people are out eating and drinking at all of our restaurants and bars for at least 10 days. It means people are shopping and will be entertained in our city. People will be here literally just spending their time, having a good time, therefore spending more money. And that money will derive a net for the city from an economic impact standpoint.
Right.
I think the way for people to get involved, I'm gonna pull this phone up so I get it right.
Bet.
Kathy Boswell, everybody. Kathy Boswell is a VP with the World Games, but she's over community engagement. And I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm literally in my phone, making sure I can get her name pulled up and get her correct email address.
Perfect. Take your time. Y'all listen up, people. There's a lot of questions around how to get involved in World Games, and this is the direct plug. So this is great information.
Yeah, so Kathy Boswell email address is Kathy with the Kathy dot Boswell, Boswell at TWG2022.com. That's Kathy.Boswell at TWG2022.com. If you email Kathy, there is an entire detailed process on how to be a volunteer, get engaged, and become part of the World Games family and present to the world who the community in the city of Birmingham is. And I want to encourage you to. Please email Kathy.
That's great. That's good insight. That's good insight. All right. As I told the audience, we definitely going to do a part 2. We do got one more question. We got one more question, Doc. And you know what? It's very interesting because there was a tweet that you made a couple of years ago to Delta. So there was a situation in Georgia. I forget what triggered it. And I happened to hop on Twitter and I saw you were spitting game. Like it was smooth, Doc. It was smooth. And Randall ultimately said, hey, Delta, in mathematics, Delta represents change. How about you change your location, come to Birmingham? Something of that nature, right? And ironically enough, with the planning podcast, we actually replaced the A with the Delta sign intentionally. And that is to represent that anything we believe, anything that is significant in someone's life, the foundation of that change that they're looking to initiate is through planning, right? Can you share with our audience an example on how planning has been beneficial on a decision or a series of decisions that you've been able to make?
Yeah, so I'll give 2 examples. One is how I got to be the mayor.
Yeah.
You don't become the mayor overnight. You don't unseat an incumbent who has a 100% name identification and has a $1 million war chest, and you have no name ID and no money.
Yeah.
You have to plan for that. You have to organize for that. You got to know the steps you're going to make before you ever actually take a step and then execute on your steps. Yeah. Will it be perfect? No. Will you have some failures? Yes. Will you lose some time? Absolutely. Yeah. But if you stick to your plan, then you will eventually execute on whatever the mission is, which my mission was to become mayor. And then when I got into this job, it went from campaigning to governing. Again, when you govern in the local level, you can have the best plan, you can have the best vision and the best plan and want to execute on that. But you come into City Hall, it's like a game of whack-a-mole every single day. Something pop up, you put that out, and then something pop up over here, you put that out. Yeah. And if you get into the mode of always putting out whatever pops up, then it makes you deviate from your plan. Because plan is long-term, big picture, and you can get caught up in the minutia day to day.
Yeah.
And so separate from my chief of staff and chief of operations, I hired a chief strategist by the name of Ed Fields. Yeah. The reason I did that, because in government, you can't just focus on the day-to-day, which is the trees. You got to have a person like Ed Fields that focuses on the forest. And focusing on that forest allows me to plan out all the things we want to do for the city over the next 5 years instead of just only focus on what's in front of me today.
Right. That's solid, bro. There was so much free jewelry you dropped. I know that Birmingham appreciates your leadership, your vision, how well you listen, and how you continue to represent too, Doc. Like you make it look good, my brother. You make it look real good, man.
Appreciate you, brother.
Definitely an inspiration. And again, thank you for joining us today. We definitely got to do a part 2. Next time we're gonna be next to each other, kicking it, And so
I'll be ready, brother. And your audience, man, y'all got a jewel. Y'all got a jewel in Brother Isaac, man. Y'all keep paying up and listening.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, good people. Y'all already know. Stay tuned, subscribe, tell a friend, and stay planning.